democratic. Therefore, propaganda is vastly more important in democratic societies.
In recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person supports organizations which reflect communist teachings, or organizations labeled communist by the Department of Justice, she may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist. But there are other communists who don't show their real faces, who work more silently.
Okay, so episode 6. Today's topic, Vladimir Lenin. What do you think?
Hate the guy.
Hate the guy. I love the guy. So he wrote a book, State of Revolution. So what do you know about Vladimir Lenin?
Absolutely nothing apart from the October Revolution of 1917.
Okay, perfect, because that's what we're going to talk about. Today we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about communism. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about what he advocates for, the bourgeoisie. Is Russia communist today? I don't know.
I don't know. Probably
yes,
is.
Maybe no.
So let's dive in. Episode 6. That's
yes.
Daniel's book this week, and it's Vladimir Lenin, who's the author.
Okay, so Vladimir Lenin, born in 1870. He's today in Russia. He is. If you want to still meet him, you can. He's in the Kremlin.
Have you seen the guy?
Yes, I have seen the guy. He's in a mausoleum. But I will say 60% of the Russian population actually wants him buried. So, yeah, they don't want him in that mausoleum.
Why?
Because the idea is that why he was to remind us of the great revolution.
Like power of Russia.
Because in France, the revolution, I mean, it's even part of your anthem, right?
Yeah.
Same thing for us. It was a big thing, but now we're trying to show to the world that we're not the same Russia we were. Well, I say we, I'm a Ukrainian. I'm playing with the fire here, but they're trying to say we're that they're not part of the old Russia anymore, and that they're part of a free society, open marketplace.
So that's why they showcase
Yeah.
the body. Okay, perfect.
Okay. He was part of an educated family. He was basically he was the main part of the establishment of the Soviet Union, 1917 revolution. He actually wrote this book while being in exile.
Okay.
He was being, they were trying to find him while he was doing all of this. And he was brought up in a tough life. His brother actually died because of involvement in a revolutionary group.
Okay.
And he fell in love with Marxism in university, which he believed it was an ideal form of government. Now, my question for you, from an emotional aspect, from a psychological aspect, how do you think his brother dying as part of this involvement caused this? Do you think it affected it? Do you think it didn't?
Because it's what? Marxism?
No. Do you think personal loss, the impact of personal loss on Vladimir Lenin to do what he did? Do you think there was any?
I think probably, because
Yeah?
deeply affects your mental state to lose a close person. So maybe that aspires, I don't know, revolution, that aspires violence, and he's a really charismatic man, and I think like suffering a big loss might be a part of why he does that.
Okay, well, to talk about violence. This book is extremely violent. It was written during 1917, so it makes sense, right? Because he was trying to get people at that time during the revolution to listen to this and be like, huh, he has a point. Very violent. It's the idea of how it has to be aggressive. He emphasized the idea of smashing an existing state and its apparatus to establish a proletarian social state. To free it from exploitation and oppression.
So big populist leader.
Big
Populist leader.
Yeah,
Like all institutions are failing. We need to crush that down and build something new.
What do you think about that?
But I think.
Do you think it's effective, to make the question more specific? Do you think it was effective for him to use violence or to believe so much in violence and destruction?
I think so. Tell me if I'm wrong, but Russia under the Tsar was really poor. Wealth was distributed really unevenly. And so at that time, and during most times of suffering, a good old populist leader that like puts violence on top is what society needs for change, for
Yeah.
good change or bad change, but for change.
100%. An example from modern time that I can give is the book Karl Marx, Capital. It became a bestseller in 2008
After the crisis.
after the crisis
Wow.
in the United States. In the United States, not in Vietnam, who's communist today,
Yeah,
Right.
in the US.
but in the United States, it became the number one bestseller.
So what do you think about that? Like questioning existing
It's the
institutions.
question. It's also the question of I don't know. I don't know if communism would be more successful today. Maybe with all the technology we have, maybe with a more developed society. If we implemented it again, would it be successful? Yes, no. Victor, opinions.
But I think I'm leading you guys back to the previous podcast where we talk
Okay.
about how capitalism is, I think, one of the main vectors of progress, because communism might look good on paper, but from a historical
It
data...
looks great on paper.
No, it looks great on paper, but from a historical data and statistics perspective, the biggest leaps of progress we do is during capitalist societies, like in the antique Greece, like from the Industrial Revolution, and like today. So I feel like progress is led from competition, which is not present enough in a communist society, which is led by authoritarian leaders.
100%. And if you want a real life example of this, we don't even have to go to 2008. You just go to the International Space Station. You take a photo of South Korea North.
Yeah.
And then you see the light difference. One country has nothing and they're eating fireflies. And the other one is striving.
Eating fireflies?
Yeah, no, it's an actual thing. In North Korea, they eat fireflies.
Why?
And because they have no food. No, the funny thing is, in North Korea, one of their biggest exports, they have so many funny, imports, is Swiss cheese.
Okay. No, but I feel like...
Do you know why?
No?
Because he lived in Switzerland, he did the IB, he fell in love with cheese, and he started importing it, and he gives none of it to his people.
No, but the thing, I think this is maybe a bit perverse, because this is depicting communism in a really specific society.
In a very specific society. It's also, is North Korea's communism real communism? Was USSR communism real communism? Do we know? Maybe it was just a bad version of communism. Maybe the good one, we've never seen it.
Okay, and what does the book talks about, apart from violence?
It talks about the destruction of bourgeoisie.
Okay.
It talks about the replacement of with a worker state, and emphasizes that a state cannot be neutral and serve the interests of the ruling class. So
first of all, what's meant by neutral? A state cannot be neutral.
A state cannot be neutral to all its citizens. So it cannot be fair to all its citizens under a capitalistic society. This is what he emphasized greatly. And he has a point. Because what he argues is something that I believe happens today. We have the impact of what he called capitalist monopolies, right? And these capitalist monopolies led to what we have today as big monopoly companies who control, in essence, the world.
Mm-hmm.
And in his way, this was saying that at the end of the day, they represent the dominating society, and this dominating society puts pressures on the working class. It doesn't allow for freedom. It's controlled, and it's not actually capitalism.
I would
and
say
freedom as it speaks.
I agree with that. I agree with that postulate, but I don't agree with the solution. What's the solution from Lenin's perspective?
The solution is to create a state that is free from domination, a state that allows for a proletarian state.
Okay, but maybe you can enlighten me on that aspect. But were communist societies having some type of lobbying in some ways or not? Because I feel like it's trying to escape from it by having government intervene in.
When you say
all
lobbying, what do you mean?
By some external forces making pressure on the government, like it happens a lot in a capitalist society. You know, the firearm lobby that goes to Trump, donates $100 million and be like, chop chop, legalize weapons and make the most out of it. Those external factors that kind of tear apart the government, and I think that's what also Lenin denunciates. But do you think that was still happening under a communist society or not?
There was a lot of misinformation during communist societies, and a lot of things you don't know. But I'm assuming
it was all coming from the state.
It was all coming from the state. It was very much state controlled. Look, at the end of the day, his long term, even after all the violence, even after everything, it was to create a classless society, but also a stateless one. So no central authority. Power is is diffused in as much as it can. Does that make sense?
But I don't think it makes sense.
Yeah, but it makes sense because it never worked. It's the counteractive. You can actually argue that the book is very
Utopical, like
utopical,
not realistic.
Not realistic one, but also it's what's the correct word when you argue a point, but then you're arguing
Contradicting
yourself consistently.
Because, like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I personally believe that communism, as it's depicted, needs a high level of control. So, like, tearing it down and saying stateless society for me doesn't make sense because the base of communism is state involved in every possible activities.
But in the long term, this is what he argued. It was because you have to agree. Yes, communism under Lenin was bad, but under Stalin was worse.
Mm-hmm.
So when he depicts it, the way he depicts it is very different.
But Stalin died in 1922, right? Like, or in 23? No, maybe I'm
I don't think you are accurate. We can double check with them. Doesn't make sense because.
Yeah, he died in 1924.
Okay.
So his communist society like lasted 7 years.
But it's provoked a future generation of really tough. And they stuck with it, you know?
Okay.
I mean, the only reason the guy died was because the doctors, he didn't trust anyone so much that there were no doctors left and he died.
Okay, good.
So,
good.
yeah.
Good for him.
Good for him. Okay, so a question for you is, do you think Russia is communist today?
I believe no society can be truly communist nowadays because globalization took such a leap that you cannot really be independent and the state involved in every activity because you import from people, you export from people,
you have an open marketplace.
and so the market, like the market economy will always come back to you because you're interdependent with other capitalist countries.
And if you were to leave all other principles except for an open marketplace, do you think you have something better than potentially capitalism?
No, I think there is possibility.
Democracy.
There's possibility for communism, but I don't know about it. It's like it's not maybe for the better.
So at the end of the day, do you think Russia is communist today? Yes or no?
No.
But what do you call it? A good democracy either?
Oligarchy?
Oligarchy?
Yeah, like 10, 15 people more or less ruling everything, having business in everywhere, but still like taking as much profit as they can in a sense, and like going for their own incentives and not communist at all.
Okay. And do you think communism would be more successful if implemented today?
No, not either. I believe
with technology
and
technology would impact it.
No, but I think it's an argument that has been made multiple times and that has been tried to be refuted multiple times. But humans are greedy and in their own nature, like competition brings progress.
Yeah.
And communism is against competition.
Yeah, communism aims for equality, but often results in authoritarian rule.
Yeah.
And human rights abuses.
As well.
And human rights abuses. So yeah, no. And so to talk about to continue, I'm going to discuss some specific things because he has some thought-provoking ideas that can challenge traditional views on the state and socialist revolution. So I'm going to go one by one. You tell me if you are interested or not.
Mm-hmm.
Origin of the state.
Okay.
He argues that a state is not a consensual agreement by all members of society, but it emerges during a certain stage of development with the rise of classes. He describes the state as an organ of oppression that legalizes and perpetuates class conflicts. But
first of all, I think that comparing a state to an oppression force is one of the worst thing ever because states are what brings us peace, what brings us...
You have to understand, at that time, a state was, it was more of a... There was a king. Tsar. So from his point of view. Yeah, but you still couldn't kill a random guy and be okay with it. Like there were some laws, maybe like they were bad and made for oppressions. And I agree it was highly imperfect states, but they were still, I would say, an argument of order. Yeah, and in that sense he criticizes social democrats for working with an existing state. and labeling them as opportunists.
So basically, no, yeah, that's like the really populist thesis of saying anyone who collaborates with the state is a bitch. Everyone who supports democracy in that form is like kind of, how do you say that? But like collaborating with evil.
Yeah, and he believed that he challenged anarchists for advocating the complete abolition of the state, referring to them as utopians who underestimate this transitional phase. He was very keen on talking about this transitional phase when it came to capitalism and socialism, about how it's a slowly away, the withering of the state. This is something he always discusses, how socialism progresses towards communism, and the functions of the state can be gradually performed by the people as a whole.
Okay, what does that mean?
He talks about like there needs to be a transition state. He considered socialism the same thing as communism. What do you think of that? That's what he advocated for. That's why I believe in some degree of socialism, because you need to redistribute wealth, but I still believe in a competition environment. And the fact that he believing in a transitional phase is highly realistic from his perspective, and I like that, and I think it's important to emphasize that he was right about this. But the like where he was trying to get was, in my opinion, a mistake. In what sense exactly?
In the sense of like he was calling the anarchists utopians because he believed in a transition, but I think the end goal is an utopia. Like whether you go through a transition, whether you wait 1,000 years, whether you at the end of the day, a stateless society is an utopia.
Okay, that's very fair. He also talks about armed workers. So he emphasized the importance of arming the working class and creating a state where the armed people themselves would be the government. United States.
So everyone with a gun and everyone is able to practice their own law. Yeah, but he believes too much in the humans. Like I believe in humans, but I don't believe in them to that degree.
This is odd because he came from a good family. You know, he wasn't exactly the poor. There were very poor people back then who, especially during that time of era in what was the kingdom of Russia. And he was he believed in my workers, he believed in his people, and he believed in revolutionary violence. He addressed revolutionary violence in overthrowing capitalist structures and establishing socialism. He argued that violence is inherent to revolution. Do you agree?
No, I totally agree. You need some kind of violence, but that should not be inherent.
To break something down.
And to go a bit on a structural perspective and maybe kind of talk about the architecture, you need some kind of hierarchy of violence. I believe in violence performed by a state, but I don't believe in violence performed by human beings. You need some kind of structure and hierarchy to establish laws, to establish structures, to establish peace. And I think violence should be gate-kept to authorities, like higher power.
So you don't think there's any way for a state to figure out a way where it's... Because technically speaking, he's not talking about a state. He ended up, a lot of people consider a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what if that wasn't the case? What if he did end up having a stateless society? Do you think that wouldn't work?
No. Giving the opportunity of violence to anyone is inherently failing. I strongly believe in that. For the reasons I enumerated just before.
So you don't think arming the population is a good idea?
No, I don't think arming the population is a good idea.
United States kind of does it today.
United States, no, because you have that ability, but you're still in a state of hierarchy, in a sense in which like you cannot exert violence without any boundaries. And in a stateless society, you're able to exert violence in any boundaries. You're able to do whatever you want, and I believe that's inherently wrong. Yeah.
And what do you think? Okay.
What does the book talk about? So after that,
the book talks about generally just it's very the book you can consider it a propaganda piece. If I'm being completely honest, after I read it, there was a major propaganda piece. So there isn't too much of this and that. It's more like he just says, "This is how it should be, a state of revolution," and he explains how. He talks about the transition period, the revolutionary violence, internationalism.
Internationalism, what is that?
He wants international solidarity for it to work among workers and social movements. advocating for a global revolution to overthrow capitalism and,
So
and imperialism.
So international, yeah, but that's kind of hypocritical, you know.
Because he believed socialism would only work under an international scale. So once we're all, like, you talk about an open marketplace, he was talking about the same thing, but under a socialist perspective.
Yeah, no, but that doesn't make sense because socialist societies need intervention for government to.
But he believed that the working class would work with each other, but on a much larger scale. Do you think that wouldn't eventually lead to?
No, it doesn't make sense for the reason I evocated just before, in my opinion.
Okay. So social society, bad.
Bad.
Okay. He talks also about dual power, which he discussed the concept of dual power, where the existing bourgeoisie state coexists with emerging proletarian institution during revolutionary periods. This dynamic reflects the struggle for power between the ruling class and the working class. What do you think of that? Because this is something he discussed. He talks about things very straightforward. He doesn't. This is the thing I realized. He doesn't really elaborate. He talks about Vanguard Party, the importance of Vanguard Party composed of workers to take charge during the transitional periods. He talks very seriously about this transitional period of how it should go very slowly and very fairly. And he really believes in his idea. He gives a lot of, the withering away of the state.
Okay, that's interesting. And so the whole book is about that.
The whole book is about that.
Okay. But I don't think I have much to say about this because for me, on a really fundamental basis, it doesn't make sense. You have this contradiction. You have this duality, dichotomy between the importance of a state in a socialist or communist society and the fact that at the end of the day, he believes in a stateless society.
Yeah, I think he underscores the complexity and the critical nature of socialism, which makes it, at the end of the day, even in my opinion,
utopists. Yeah.
No one better than me, or maybe potentially my parents, can tell you that it is trash.
Why?
Because my parents lived in this society. They in a way, I experienced it. I can still feel it today when I lived, when Ukraine wasn't in a war situation. It doesn't work. It slowed us down so much. It slowed us down so much that it's going to take us even... Let's say the war never happened. It'll take us at least 20 years to recover. There's I remember when the war started, I spoke to this Venezuelan guy. He told me Russia was 20 years away from everyone. Now it's going to be 30.
Which totally makes sense. And so I believe on a structural standpoint that to be good at politics and what probably Stalin missed in some of his arguments, Lenin, sorry, my bad, is that you need to understand, we were talking about that today, complex systems. And complex systems is what everything rules our society, even more now that we're independent. We have all those systems that are all related one or another. And having the brain capability to modelize all those systems, be able to comprehend them, see how they interact with each other, and then establish an action plan is the way to go. And I think he omits some systems in his way of thinking when he talks about socialism and communism in his book. I would think maybe about two of them. First of all, the importance of a state intervention and the systems around authority. And second of all, the really basic social structure of human thinking. Those two complex systems really interact with each other. How humans work, how humans process information, and how they interact with authority. And those two systems, I think he omits the basic functioning of them. And that's why I think his idea fails. What do you think about that?
I agree. At the end of the day, look, what he advocated for made sense, but he gave control to the people by allowing them to, he said the government would improve by allowing the people to have more power. Which back then, yes. I don't blame him because you start going for utopias that may not be true in the situation that the Russians were at that time. I don't blame him. But it can all be fixed with entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
You give people incentive to be entrepreneurial and you have insane progress, and he wanted to give them the state. Both you
No,
would think make sense, but
that's why you cannot really
wrong.
blame him, because I believe complex systems perception in some environments are corrupted.
At that time, there was nothing he could compare himself to.
Yeah.
He was brand new.
So when you're in a society and in an environment who is like really poor, really authoritarian and all of that, I feel like it corrupts your perception of complex systems, and so you're not able to assess truly situations. So I don't know how to solve that issue.
His example at that time that he could use, like nowadays, yes, we have Russia, we have China, we have etc., we have Vietnam. It doesn't stop North Korea. But at his time, he just had Germany. Germany was at that time kind of actually moving towards what he was saying. Because, I mean, Marx.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, it didn't function correctly. It ended up failing. But yeah, no.
But so, like, to kind of find a solution, because that's what we try to be here for, how do you objectively assess complex systems?
What do you mean by that for our audience?
So I explained a bit what complex systems were. I believe this perception is corrupted when you're in environments like authoritarian societies. You're not able to comprehend truly human nature. You're not able to comprehend truly.
He's the one who kind of created this authoritarian society. It was an authoritarian society, yes, but not as bad as it became.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who ended up supporting. The Tsar did try, at least the last one did try and help, but he came in young. He came in not experienced, and it inevitably failed. Meanwhile, at the same time, Europe was progressing, Europe was growing, everything was going well for them. Meanwhile, like I said, we were stuck 20 years before, and we still kind of are, if not, like I said, 30. But yeah, no. But there were some benefits of what he advocated for. Because at the end of the day, the only reason to why my grandma has 2 apartments is because of him. There were no homeless people.
Yeah.
People were living equally, to an extent. There was no progress, but there was no... You consider Madrid, where we are right now, a pretty developed society, yes?
Yes.
But you don't have to go too far to find a homeless guy.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Not everyone has a place to live. It's a huge issue nowadays. There's a countless amount of problems. So it's finding the balance between two. So if you were to take certain things from communism, what would it be? Or do you think one cannot live with the other? Do you think they can't live in mutual...
What cannot live with the other?
Certain aspects of communism cannot work with the society we have today. Because at the end of the day, you can't just give away apartments to people. Because back then, the state would offer you apartments based on you have 5 kids, you have an apartment for 5 people. Well, 7 because you have mother.
No, I think that's too difficult to talk about because it's so abstract, so utopian that you cannot, because the way in most of our societies we accumulate capital leads to a structure in which you cannot do that, and so or even a relationship with capital cannot lead to those conclusions. So I don't believe it's even a fair debate because you cannot do that.
So you argue the fact that growth, correct growth, is limited under a communist society.
Yes.
Because then I can argue that during the Cold War, 2 main progressive like they were making new things, inventing new stuff, was the United States, but including the USSR. The space race, a lot of progress, a lot of things. No one broke.
And I think that's also what can corrupt your perception of systems, is that space race is a really specific vector. It's a really specific, yes, they competed in that way, but what about computing? What about during the...
Computing?
Yeah.
They were doing well.
No, they were doing well, but not anything compared to...
Not as good, but they were doing well in France. They were doing well better than Germany.
Because they were a superpower. But what I mean is that if you take the global thing, there's only some vectors in which the USSR truly competition to the US. On a global scale, the US was far above.
I think at the end of the day, the USSR was having access to a very limited population, which is why it wasn't able to work effectively. But Yeah, so no, going back to my question, do you think they can't work with each other
No,
at all?
at all.
Nothing you would take from communism and bring it to today's society? Nothing?
No, yeah, I would bring the intervention of the state in people's
So
life.
more dramatic intervention?
Yes.
More monetary policy?
More policies in general, because I don't believe because we're
Fiscal?
because humans are uneducated, because humans don't have really free will because of many things, because we're not able to do the good choices. So we need to have that system, that hierarchical structure, which makes us, for the greater good, I feel, make better choices.
Okay.
Does the book talk about anything more like in depth, or is that pretty much
The
it?
book talks in depth of his opinions. The book, this is the problem. Like, it goes back to the fact
No, but let's discuss his opinions.
They didn't have open. His opinions are straightforward. His opinions are, I am right. This is the way it has to go. Marxism all the way. Socialism, capitalism sucks.
Mm-hmm.
He completely hated capitalism. He believed, again, but we see today, we have major companies owned by other major companies, and at the end of the day, they do control the world.
I don't believe they control the world, because states are still above them. States are still above any society. You can see some kind of pressuring by going back.
So what do you think about it when Putin tells his interviewer that at the end of the day, Trump has no word. At the end of the day, a guy in a black suit comes and tells him what to do.
That's false. I don't
don't
believe
think
in
that's
that.
true?
I don't believe in that. That's a fantasized world in which you have people like, it's kind of, this is like objectifying capitalism and saying that there is this higher force, which is in some way true, because the market is an invisible force. But at the end of the day, you see Trump doing his choices. You see like presidents doing their choices. They are the one who truly shape the world. And even if companies have an impact in decisions with lobbying, with society impact, with the employees they have, and with the innovation they bring, they are not relevant to like a state's perspective.
And what do you think about governments benefiting major companies and more higher class people nowadays than they do the average workforce?
No, but they are benefiting from it because they're responsible for that. Like, companies in which there is countries in which there is high.
The argument is they're benefiting 1% of the population and leaving the 99 other.
Which is true and which needs to be changed. That's why I argue for more government intervention. But I believe that the US can be proud that they have Google, that they have Meta, that they have Microsoft. Like, it did not just appear out of thin air. In the Silicon Valley, they spent billions building NASA, they spent billions stimulating entrepreneurship, they spent billions educating people and having like high center of education like Stanford. And I don't believe it's just out of thin air that appeared like that. Like, states are responsible for high entrepreneurship, for creation of monopolies, for creation of companies, for like innovation, and that's why I believe that yes, states are responsible for all those things. And if you prosper, it's because you took the decision to prosper. That's it.
And you don't think the government can enforce that on a person to prosper? You think it's just human? Government gives you incentive, and that's why you do it. Because back then they would have major money flowing going into things like here. This is how we're going to beat America. This is what we want you to create. They were creating things, right? They did have their own kind of systems. They had their own search bases. They had their own
yes, but
built games.
Any government entrepreneur mindset for innovation leads to less efficiency.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I'm a center of research and I need to research spaceships. I receive $100 million a year and I'm a state government organization. If I do not make a big discovery next year, I'm still going to receive my $100 million. I'm not incentivized by the market. As for a capitalist or a private company receives $100 million in funding, if the next year they don't make the big discovery, if the next year they don't build the nice product, but they're dead. And so fostering this private and capitalistic mindset is what leads to growth and progress from empirical data and statistical perspective.
So Russia would be better off if they went straight towards capitalism and never towards communism, even in the situation that they were.
In the situation
because
that
you
they
can
were,
argue that the fall of communism was the worst thing to ever happen, and I think a lot of major leaders, but one major leader would highly agree with me on that. Well,
yes,
not agree with me, but agree on my,
and you know why? I'm quoting back Lenin. You need transitions. You need transitions. So that communist society was good but inefficient, and it fell really abruptly. That's what led to failure. If you had a nice transition to another society with maybe less state intervention, I'm not saying full-on capitalism, because full-on capitalism is bad. But the transition towards a more balanced state would, in my opinion, be way better. And yet the fall of communism was bad because it was direct, abrupt, and in one day USSR disappeared out of thin air.
Okay. Now you said that certain things can mix, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Now one country that does kind of do that, you can agree with me straight away, yes or no, is China.
Mm-hmm.
Who kind of takes those aspects. Now, based on what you told me before, if we're looking at the exponential growth of China, which is insane,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to catch up to the United States. Now, there's someone who mixed those two things very correctly. Now, I can promise you, the state in China controls a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, technically speaking, what Lenin was kind of leaning towards. A society that, yes, has progress, a society that is works with everyone else, preferably, whether it happens or not, but nonetheless has those fundamentals of a socialist, but in his opinion, communist society. Which China...
My take on China is that communist is purely ideological. It's a mask you hide behind, but they're communists in no way. Companies, innovation and progress is led by people. So you see Alibaba, you see all those things.
Controlled by the government.
Controlled by the government after...
So it's just a mask for the government, again.
Yeah, no, but it's controlled by the government, but they don't institutionalize it. In a sense, if Alibaba fails tomorrow, the government's no more involved. They throw it in the bin. Pam, pam, pam. It's efficiency, competition, capitalism. Alibaba was not a state-led initiative. It was an individual initiative that, when it succeeded, got controlled by the state. So
that's kind of the same thing that happened during communist Russia. They would create things and the government would take them. Nintendo is Japanese. Yeah, but when it came to the game, what's the game? Tetris.
Yeah.
Tetris. Some guy made it in the back of his computer, and then the government took it.
Yeah, but it's American today. I don't like.
But it was very close. It was a fight for them to take it there. Nonetheless, it was theirs. The patent was held by the Russian.
But I don't understand how Russia created value with that. It's a really specific example.
Yeah, but in general, that's what they would do. That's the best example I can bring right now, but at the top of my head. But they would do that. They would take over anyone who created something. They would eventually take it, which is exactly what China does today. They create something, yes, and if it brings, it makes sense. Russia does it today. Perfect example. From my life. Let's say person A, yes, created a company. It became valued 20 million. The government came and took it, told them to sell it to them for 5. Well, there you go. The government took it. And now the government holds it, and now it's a much more successful company.
Yes, but because...
Technically, in a way that is...
Because in Russia, because of many aspects, it's a corrupted country. You have that kind of duality in which, yes, it's government-led, but you cannot really get rid of it because there is an oligarch involved. So even if the company does bad, you need to sustain it because the guy has other companies that are making that and that. And so because they have those incentives of keeping non-efficient businesses alive, they lose. And so,
how is China different to Russia in that sense?
Because China is it's like there is no room for emotions, there is no room for corruption, there is room for efficiency. And I think you cannot even compare them because we were in a much less interdependent society, and most of Chinese...
much less?
Yeah, we were not interdependent at the time.
Oh, at the time, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And so today, like a big reason, if not the only one, for which China is because of globalization, because of exports. And so they were built on totally different grounds, first of all. And second of all, even if they interact with companies, I believe they're full on capitalistic. There's no...
Yeah, but again, this goes back to me saying, like, he had his opinion, right? He had his very clear, very strict, very strong opinion. But my argument is, could we merge? Because at the end of the day, China has some things that we can't access.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes them safer. That makes them safer than the United States.
And more independent.
More independent. Because it is state-owned. Because the state controls certain things. Because the state is very strict on certain things, and you will never... I tried to download that Chinese app. What is it called?
QQ?
WeChat.
WeChat.
Okay, WeChat. Couldn't get it. It was impossible. I had to sign up. I had to have their passport number. I had to have their ID number. If I didn't have their ID number, I need to show my face. My eyes probably don't match. So they were confused. And then that led to, but no, they rejected me. I tried everything. I used my friend's ID card who lives in China. I did everything correctly. I even put his name. No, it didn't work. Why? Because I was located in a different place. I put it on VPN. The thing sent me, you have VPN on, switch it off. And it came in, the state of China does not allow this. It was very state controlled. Now, the US doesn't have much of that. The US is much more vulnerable to attacks. Because of that reason. So I'm saying the combination between certain things he says here, like the government controlling things, with what we have today.
So you think China is a...
In the long term, I think China ends up having, with their current thing, is better than what we have now.
But
of course, they have their ethics. Of course, they have their camps, right?
Yes.
Which is fucked.
Completely fucked.
It is fucked. Nonetheless, when it comes to like what you love to talk about, exponential growth, economy, all of this, but look at their cities. Look at where they're growing. New York was New York 50 years ago. What's the city again? It was a fishing area 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now it looks better than Dubai. You know what I mean? Like you can make it work. You can have a combination. But even let's take Dubai. That's a freaking world.
No, but that's where
everything is state-owned.
That's where I admit my ignorance. I'm not educated enough on the matter to know if China is a succeeding society and will be succeeding, because I believe deep inside me that it will fail because government-owned incentives are inefficient at the end. I think so. But every metrics proved me wrong recently.
Because I mean, when it comes to like sustainability, they're again fucking everyone. Their aims when it comes to sustainability are crazy, but these are government. This is not their people who are individually coming up to, this is them saying, but you get to this number, or you're
yeah, but maybe I'm totally wrong then, and Lenin is the
he's the goat.
Lenin is the fucking goat.
Because I feel like, yes, under that time where it wasn't interdependent, it made sense to what he said, and it kind of worked. It did get Russia out of the hole it was in. It wasn't a major hole, I must say. It was terrible. But yeah, he introduced a lot of things, and the workforce genuinely worked. Yes, now, because this book was written in 1917, 100-year difference. So now we this is what happens. We can't just take the entire book and put it today. Nothing. You can't do that with basically anything nowadays. But taking small things, combining them with what we have now, and we are going much, much closer to a perfect society.
I don't know.
Opinions?
It's a very hard
thing.
My IQ is not high enough. I'm not able to comprehend complex systems at that level yet. But I'm reading a lot about it. Probably next books are going to be about complex systems.
Complex systems?
It's going to be really boring, really hard to understand, but I assume you guys will love it because we are thriving towards knowledge. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Daniel, about this book? Because I feel like we've been yapping for the past 10 minutes.
But it was good yapping.
It was good yapping.
It gave... okay. Yes, I have one last thing. It's a quote.
Mm-hmm.
You can give me your opinion on it, or you don't have to.
Okay.
Freedom in capitalist society always remains about the same as it was in ancient Greek republics. Freedom for the slave owners.
Oof. Ooh la 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 la.
And that's what he says in the book.
Yeah, and he's right. And that's why I believe in state intervention. But to a certain degree. Everything is about nuance. Everything is about finding the good in between. And yeah, antique Greek is seen as an amazing society in which people were thriving, but it's true, slave owners, and it was a high minority who was benefiting from all those benefits. And totally,
Yeah.
state intervention, but not too much. Communism.
So So we take some things from the book. Can we agree on that? We take some things. We take some things, and
no, we don't take things from the book because it's a propaganda piece.
We go to the U.S. Washington and we tell them, here we have a better plan.
We have a better plan.
Okay. Episode 6. This was nice. What
was the name of the book again?
State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. It's a big red book with his face on it.
Perfect.
Very easy to recognize. We'll show it in the beginning and at the end of the podcast.
Thank you very much for listening. It was Let's Dive In episode 6 and see you next week with my book.